In the glittering ballrooms of 1920s Europe, she wore diamonds that could rival any crown. Princess Antonia of Luxembourg danced at her fairy tale wedding, adorned in the legendary Bavarian ruby and Spinel tiara, a masterpiece so magnificent that even queens found it too heavy to wear. But 23 years later, this same princess would stand in the shadows of Dachau concentration camp, weighing barely 77 pounds, her royal jewels replaced by wooden clogs and prison rags. How does a woman go from wearing one of Europe's most spectacular tiaras to becoming a victim of the Nazi regime's most brutal revenge? And why did she make a promise that would define the rest of her life? A vow so powerful it echoed through the corridors of European royalty for decades. This is the story of Princess Antonia of Luxembourg, the woman who chose love over politics, courage over compromise, and ultimately paid a price that no tiara could ever measure. Today, we unlock one of the most extraordinary and heartbreaking stories in royal history. You'll discover how a Danish princess's fairy tale romance became entangled with the darkest chapter of the 20th century. We'll explore the magnificent jewels that once adorned her, including that legendary Bavarian tiara that had remained unworn for nearly a century, and trace her journey from the heights of European aristocracy to the depths of human suffering. But this isn't just a story of tragedy. It's a testament to the unbreakable spirit of a woman who, when faced with unimaginable horror, chose dignity over defeat. Her story reveals how true royalty isn't measured in carrots or crowns, but in the courage to stand firm when everything you hold dear is stripped away. And at the heart of it all lies a promise. 5 words that would define her final years and serve as a quiet but powerful protest against the regime that tried to destroy her soul. The fairy tale beginning. Our story begins not in the grand palaces of major European capitals, but in the romantic setting of Schloss Hohenburg in Bavaria, where on October 7, 1899, Princess Antonia was born. Christened Antoinette Robert Sophie Wilhelmina, she was the 4th daughter of Grand Duke Guillaume IV of Luxembourg and Infanta Marie-Anne of Portugal. From her earliest days, Antonia, affectionately called Tony by her family, was surrounded by the complex web of European royalty. 2 of her elder sisters would become Grand Duchesses of Luxembourg, while she grew up between her family's residences and her mother's Portuguese estates, developing the cosmopolitan grace that would serve her throughout her extraordinary life. But it was her musical talent that truly set her apart. While her sisters prepared for their roles as future sovereigns, Antonia's fingers danced across piano keys with the same elegance she would later bring to navigating the treacherous waters of 20th century European politics. A love that defied a continent. In 1918, as World War I raged across Europe, 17-year-old Antonia encountered a man whose presence would forever alter her destiny. Crown Prince Rupprecht of Bavaria was no ordinary suitor. At 47, he was 30 years her senior, a brilliant military strategist and, most controversially, a German field marshal who had commanded enemy forces during the Great War. The engagement announcement sent shockwaves through Luxembourg. Here was their princess, choosing to marry a man many considered the Luxembourg hangman, a German officer whose armies had occupied their homeland. The political backlash was swift and merciless, contributing to the constitutional crisis that would force Antonia's sister, Grand Duchess Marie-Adélaïde, to abdicate. But Antonia's heart had chosen, and she would not be swayed. "I love him more than my life," she declared, with the fierce certainty that only true love can inspire. When pressure mounted and Rupprecht, seeking to protect both their families, called off their engagement, Antonia retreated to pursue her musical studies. Yet her heart remained unbroken, waiting for fate to clear their path. The wedding of the century and its magnificent jewels. That path cleared in the most unexpected way. The end of the war brought the abdication of both Marie-Adélaïde and Rupprecht's father, King Ludwig III of Bavaria, removing the political obstacles that had kept the lovers apart. On April 7, 1921, at the very castle where she was born, 21-year-old Antonia married her 51-year-old prince in a ceremony that blazed with both controversy and unprecedented splendor. For her wedding portraits, Antonia chose to wear something extraordinary: the massive Bavarian ruby and Spinel tiara. This breathtaking creation, commissioned in 1830 by King Ludwig I for Queen Therese, featured rubies, spinels, and diamonds set in intricate floral designs that captured light like trapped starfire. The tiara was so heavy that Queen Therese had rarely worn it, finding it too cumbersome for regular wear. But Antonia bore its weight with regal grace, as if preparing for the far heavier burdens fate would soon place upon her shoulders. The tiara was part of a magnificent parure that included a spectacular necklace, earrings and bracelets, all crafted by court jeweler Caspar Rielander. In her wedding photographs by renowned photographer Franz Greiner, Antonia balanced the massive diadem atop her head, worn over a white lace cap with flowing lappets in traditional Bavarian royal bride style. The contrast was striking. This young woman from Luxembourg, embracing the full regalia of Bavarian royalty with such natural elegance that she seemed born to wear it. But Antonia's jewellery collection extended far beyond this single spectacular piece. As Crown Princess of Bavaria, she gained access to the legendary Wittelsbach treasury, including the famous Bavarian lover's knot tiara, an elaborate creation featuring 16 Baroque pearl drops suspended from diamond love knots, topped by 16 upright pear-shaped pearls. This had been one of Queen Therese's most treasured ornaments, and Antonia was photographed wearing it in the 1920s, paired with Therese's pearl earrings and necklace in a glittering ensemble that showcased her understanding of royal jewellery's symbolic power. The parliamentary vote on their marriage passed by the narrowest of margins, 26 to 24, but Antonia had won more than political approval. She had secured a love that would sustain her through the darkest chapter of her life. A life of royal splendor. Throughout the 1920s and early 1930s, Antonia and Rupprecht settled into married bliss, welcoming 6 children who would become both her greatest joy and her most vulnerable treasure. During these golden years, Antonia embraced her role as Bavaria's crown princess with remarkable grace, often appearing at court ceremonies and cultural events adorned in the magnificent Wittelsbach jewels. In 1925, she presided over Munich's first ever chrysanthemum ball, a high society gala where she dazzled guests wearing elements from the ruby and Spinel parure. The jewels that had once seemed almost too magnificent for mortal wear found their perfect mistress in Antonia, who understood instinctively how to balance their grandeur with her natural warmth and accessibility. But even as she lived this fairy tale existence, moving between Bavaria's many castles and estates, Antonia remained grounded in her family life. She devoted herself to raising her children and supporting Rupprecht's efforts to preserve the legacy of the Bavarian royal house, all while serving as patroness of charitable and cultural events throughout the region. The gathering storm. As the decade progressed, however, a cancer spread across Germany that would ultimately consume everything Antonia held dear. Adolf Hitler's rise to power brought with it a particular hatred for Crown Prince Rupprecht, whose refusal to support the 1923 beer hall putsch had earned the future Führer's lasting enmity. Hitler, recognizing Rupprecht's continued popularity among Bavarians, initially tried seduction rather than force, offering him the role of Bavarian state commissioner and even hinting at restoring the monarchy. But Rupprecht's moral compass pointed true north. During a meeting with King George V of Britain in 1934, he declared that he remained convinced that the Führer was insane. The die was cast, There could be no compromise with evil. By the mid-1930s, the Nazi authorities began systematically dismantling any potential sources of alternate loyalty. Monarchist groups in Bavaria were dissolved, friends of the Wittelsbachs were arrested, and Rupprecht himself was increasingly sidelined from public life. The Crown Prince and Princess made quiet acts of resistance. They refused to participate in Nazi plebiscites, and Rupprecht pointedly declined to allow swastika flags to be flown at his residences. Recognizing the growing danger, Rupprecht made the agonizing decision to send his children to safety in England rather than allow them to be indoctrinated into the Hitler Youth. As war clouds gathered, the family fled to Italy in December 1939, believing themselves beyond Hitler's reach. They were tragically wrong. The final confiscation. The last straw came when the Nazis confiscated the Wittelsbachs' beloved home, Schloss Leutstetten, near Munich in late 1939. This wasn't merely the seizure of property, it was the systematic erasure of a royal legacy that had endured for centuries. Along with the castle went access to the magnificent Wittelsbach treasury, including all those spectacular jewels that had once adorned Antonia at the height of her royal life. The woman who had once worn the legendary Bavarian ruby tiara, who had presided over glittering balls adorned in diamonds and pearls, now found herself in exile with only the jewels she had managed to take with her. It was a cruel preview of the far greater losses that lay ahead. The price of righteousness. Following the failed assassination attempt on Hitler on July 20, 1944, the Nazi net tightened with terrifying efficiency. Crown Prince Rupprecht, now actively in contact with the Allies, was forced into hiding. In retaliation for her husband's betrayal, Princess Antonia and her 3 youngest daughters were arrested by Nazi forces in northern Italy. Hitler's personal decree regarding the Wittelsbachs was vindictive and specific. If they couldn't catch Rupprecht himself, they would punish his wife and children under the Nazi policy of Sippenhaft, holding entire families responsible for the alleged crimes of one member. What followed was a journey into the heart of human darkness that would have broken lesser spirits. Antonia, already weakened by typhus, was initially left in a hospital in Innsbruck, while her daughters were transported to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. The separation from her children added a heartbreaking layer of maternal anguish to her already dire situation. Through the valley of the shadow of death. The concentration camps of Sachsenhausen, Flossenbürg, and finally Dachau became Antonia's Via Dolorosa, her path of sorrows. In these places where humanity was systematically stripped away, where death stalked the living and hope itself became a form of resistance, Princess Antonia faced her greatest test. The physical brutality she endured defies description. Typhus ravaged her body, malnutrition reduced her to skeletal frailty, and torture became a daily reality. The woman who had once worn glittering tiaras was now clad in tatters and wooden clogs, struggling to survive on meager rations under the constant threat of violence. But it was the psychological warfare that revealed the true steel in her character. Again and again, her captors demanded she betray her husband's resistance network, threatening her children, offering freedom in exchange for information. They knew exactly who she was. This wasn't random brutality, but calculated revenge against a woman whose only crime was loving a man who refused to bow to tyranny. Each time, Antonia's answer was the same: silence. Her refusal to break, to betray the cause of freedom, even when her own children's lives hung in the balance, stands as one of the most extraordinary acts of courage in an era defined by both heroism and horror. In the camps where so many lost their humanity, Antonia found hers and held it close, a flame that no amount of darkness could extinguish. Liberation and a sacred promise. On April 30, 1945, American forces liberated Dachau. When they found Princess Antonia in a hospital in Jena, she weighed only 5.5 stone, a mere shadow of the vibrant woman who had once worn the massive Bavarian tiara with such grace. The contrast was devastating. This was the same woman who had once dazzled European society, who had worn some of the continent's most magnificent jewels, who had presided over glittering balls and state ceremonies. Now she was barely recognizable, her body broken by months of systematic cruelty. The physical liberation was complete, but the psychological wounds would never fully heal. Like so many Holocaust survivors, Antonia suffered from what we now recognize as complex post-traumatic stress disorder, the invisible scars that cut deeper than any physical injury. In the immediate aftermath of her liberation, as she struggled to rebuild her shattered health and fractured psyche, Princess Antonia made a vow that would define the remainder of her life. Standing on free soil for the first time in nearly a year, she declared with the same fierce certainty that had once proclaimed her love for Rupprecht, "I will never set foot in Germany again." This was not merely a statement of personal preference or political protest. It was a promise forged in the furnaces of Dachau, tempered by memories of systematic cruelty and strengthened by an unshakable moral conviction that some wounds cut too deep for forgiveness. The final chapter. After a brief return to Luxembourg, a homeland that welcomed her with tears of joy and profound respect, Antonia chose exile. She settled first in Switzerland and later in Italy, creating a new life in lands that had not participated in her torment. Her children, particularly her daughters who had shared her suffering, understood and supported her decision. Unlike their mother, some eventually chose to return to Germany, but they never questioned Antonia's choice to maintain her distance. The years following her liberation were marked by a quiet dignity that spoke louder than any royal proclamation. Though her health remained fragile, the typhus, malnutrition, and psychological trauma had left indelible marks. Antonia found peace in her Swiss and Italian refuges. When her husband Rupprecht finally emerged from hiding and returned to Bavaria in September 1945 to reclaim Schloss Leutstetten, Antonia did not accompany him. The jewels, the castles, the life they had built together, all of it remained on the other side of a line she would never cross again. On July 31, 1954, in the mountain air of Lenzerheide, Switzerland, Princess Antonia closed her eyes for the final time. She was 54 years old, having lived through the collapse of empires, the rise of fascism, the horrors of the Holocaust, and the long, slow journey toward healing. True to her word, she had never again set foot on German soil. The crown she never wore. Princess Antonia's story resonates across the decades not because she was born to privilege, but because she chose to remain human when inhumanity surrounded her. Her refusal to betray her principles, even under the most extreme duress, stands as a testament to the power of moral courage. Her promise never to return to Germany was not born of hatred, but of a profound understanding that some lines, once crossed, change us forever. It was a quiet but powerful form of resistance, a lifelong protest against the regime that had tried to destroy her soul. The magnificent Bavarian ruby tiara she once wore now rests in a museum, its gems catching light for tourists and historians. The lover's knot tiara, with its cascading pearls, remains part of the Wittelsbach collection. But the true treasure, Antonia's unbreakable spirit, lives on in the hearts of all who hear her story and choose, as she did, to stand firm when the world demands we bend. In remembering Princess Antonia, we honor not just a princess who suffered, but a human being who, when tested to the very limits of endurance, chose to remain human. Her promise, carved in pain and kept in exile, stands as an eternal reminder that some things, dignity, integrity, love, are worth more than freedom itself. The woman who once wore Europe's most magnificent jewels discovered that true wealth cannot be stolen, true nobility cannot be stripped away, and true love cannot be broken by any earthly power. Princess Antonia of Luxembourg kept her promise. She never again set foot in Germany. But her legacy walks free in every corner of the world where human dignity is valued above political convenience. Her story teaches us that royalty is not about the crown you inherit, but about the character you choose to display when everything is taken from you. In the darkest moments of human history, when civilization itself seemed to crumble, one woman's refusal to break became a beacon of hope that still shines today. If you found Princess Antonia's story as compelling as I did, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. There are so many more untold stories of remarkable royal women waiting to be discovered. Women who faced impossible choices, who sacrificed everything for love or principle, who found strength in the darkest moments of history.